Let us build a full-blown food ordering UI clone with React Native using the latest packages of Expo Router, Zustand for state management, Reanimated for animations, and even include Google API. Hey everyone, what's up? This is Simon from Galaxies.dev, and in today's video we're gonna have a huge build of a React Native clone application. We're gonna try and clone the Deliveroo food delivering application, and we're gonna have 10 different sections that I want to quickly walk you through before we get into the code of this build. You will also find the code linked below on Galaxies.dev, which is my platform to help you learn React Native, and there you're gonna also find the asset bundle that we need for our build. So the first step is we're gonna build a cool header component in our application. This is the part up here. We're gonna have this custom setup of a React Native header. The second part is then integrating a bottom sheet, which appears once we click on one of the elements up here in our header. Third part is integrating a modal, which opens up if we click a different button here in our header to define these settings. On this page, we will use some cool checkbox behavior and additionally come up with this cool animation, which is using Reanimated to make that button appear as it expands and then closes back. Once we're done with that modal, we're gonna get back into our initial modal and implement a cool Google Maps view, including a search for locations that is really working with the actual Google API and focuses on our map wherever our user selects a place. When we are done with that, we're gonna implement our page up here, which has these cool horizontal scrollers and the cards, which display just like this based on some dummy JSON data. After the homepage is done, we're gonna get into the details page of a restaurant where we kick it off by implementing this cool parallax header up here and the animation that comes up once we scroll that page. After that animation and work on the header, we're gonna implement a section list which displays the menu as we can see it based on different sections in our view, including different setups with borders and different components. At that point, we're gonna also implement these cool sticky segments up here, which by the way only come up once we scroll that page to a certain degree and which also focus one of the elements whenever we click them. To actually add items to our cart, we're gonna implement this modal with additional animations from Reanimated to make the images fade in and the different text elements as well. We will then wrap it up by actually using a state management in our application, which allows us to add elements, keep a cart of items, and then view the basket, where we also add a cool swipe to delete, and finally we'll be able to finish our order with a nice little confetti animation. So if you're ready to take your React Native skill to the next level, follow me in this build, make sure you subscribe to this channel, and also check out Galaxies.dev, where I have in-depth courses on helping you with specific problems to become a great React Native developer. But now, without further ado, let's dive into our food delivery clone. Alright, let's start our application by using the create expo command. So simply run npx create expo app at latest, which means we're going to use the latest version of the Expo SDK. We give our application a name. I called my Deliveroo clone, and we're also going to use a little template. So you can run this and get the list of templates, but we will simply pick the tabs layout, as this will give us the Expo Router version 2 and a file-based routing, which came with Expo version 49 included. So once you get that, you can bring up your project in your favorite IDE. I'm using Visual Studio Code, and we can immediately get started by running npx expo, which will then bring up the preview of our application. You can scan this QR code with your device. If you have the Expo Go application installed on Android and iOS, you can preview your app there, or you can just press I for the iOS simulator, A for Android, or even W for the web. But later on we're going to use native components, so the web will not work great in this example anymore. So I'm going with the iOS simulator. I have it here to my side, and it comes up with the default view of that initial tabs template. Before we write any code, let's quickly check out what we got in this initial setup. So we got a bunch of files here for our TypeScript configuration, the package.json with all the packages installed. We got the metro config for bundling our app. We got the Expo environment. We actually will create our own environment. This app JSON file is also an information for Expo how to build our app in the manage workflow. And then we come to the actual files. So within app, we're gonna have the actual app and the different routes. Don't worry about this. We're gonna remove a lot of this and simplify the application. Right now, this is actually a tabs application, including a little modal, but we're gonna build something more epic anyway. We have an assets folder in which we can already place the assets that you can download below this video. It's just some dummy data that we're gonna use in our application. And then we also have a components folder. We won't really use the components that are initially in here. So we can actually start by removing a lot of stuff. So let's remove pretty much all of this and also the tests folder. Can we just delete this? Yeah, I want to delete this. I can just delete the whole folder and create it when I need it. We got the constants folder. That one's actually okay. And we can quickly add a few colors down here. So we're gonna define like a primary color, a light gray, a gray, a medium background, and a green background. So I took those from the official Deliveroo application, and then we're gonna reuse them in our application. That will make it a lot easier in our pages to stick to this color theme. Now, additionally, I want to get rid of the tabs folder. I want to get rid of missing HTML, actually a modal as well. I want to pretty much remove everything. But to use the file-based routing, we're going to at least need an index file. So let's create an index.tsx. And within, I'm going to use a little snippet. I'm going to run RNFE, which stands for React Native Functional Export Component. So then it selects this name, and I can just give it a name like index or page or whatever you prefer. Additionally, we need to fix the layout file. So in the layout file, this defines the actual UI for our application with the Expo router. And we're gonna remove a bunch of things. So we don't really need this first part here. We can keep this, but I wanna set this to index because index is my initial route name. I don't really need all this stuff here. Yeah, really, we don't need that. We're just gonna keep the root layout, but I'm gonna say export default function root layout. We're gonna get rid of the color scheme and the theme provider to really simplify our app as good as possible. We don't have a modal anymore, and the only stack screen we have is an index file. And I will actually remove the header shown false. So now we have simplified this in a great way. We've removed all the code from Expo that we don't really need, and we can just build out our own application based on this. Let's check, no such file. Let's try and just hit R for reload. If you get stuck, that's usually a good way to get unstuck. So now we can see I have just this index page, which shows page in here, and that's the content we had in our index.tsx. So at this point, we have a blank application and we can just get started. The first thing we're gonna do in our application is, let's take a look at what they did in the official app. So we have this list. That means we do have an area right here, which is pretty much the main page. So let me keep this. This is the main page. So we got like sliders in here, and we're gonna get to that later. What we wanna focus on right now is actually this top part here, because this is like a custom header. You see, creating this with a default React navigation is somewhat complicated, so we're gonna do this on our own. That means we're gonna have to take care of a few things. So first of all, we have like two rows. We have this row up here with some information, and then we have this search bar row with an additional button at the end. That's what we want to focus on. Additionally to this, we have some click events. If you click on like the driver here or select location, it will bring up a little bottom sheet. If we click on this item here, we're gonna open a modal with some filters. So there's a lot going on, and we can't really do this in, let's say, an easy way with React navigation. So we're gonna create our own custom header now. Let's get started with that by creating a new folder at the top level. So I should have kept, can I just do like, I just wanna do a new file in here. Please let me do a new file, Visual Studio. Why can't I do like a new folder? I'm gonna call this one here components. And I'm just gonna copy this up to the top level. You just need to know how it works. So then go ahead with a custom header.tsx, and we're gonna call this custom header. I should have made that in a better way. I'm sorry, I messed that one up. So here we go. This is our custom header component. Also make sure that you of course name it correctly. Now, how can we use that custom header component? We just go back to our app, and within the layout file, we can now find the place where we define our first page. This is the first page of our stack. So we're using the simple stack navigation from Expo Router, which is under the hood using React Navigation, which allows us like to just push pages onto the stack. And what we want to do is we want to define some options here. So I want to define options. There's a bunch of things, like we could say this is home, and then it changes up here to home. You could supply buttons to the left and the right. But as I said, this is limited and we can't really have like a custom experience. So what we want to do is we want to supply a completely custom header in here. And we do this by saying, please render our custom header instead in this place. Now, our header doesn't really look great, so we're gonna work on that. And I also wanna use one of the latest features, which are the alias path in here. I don't know why, but I think, yeah, they didn't include it in this package anymore. So what I wanna do is I wanna set up in my tsconfig a path. So everything that's under the top level, so top level / and then everything else, as you can see here, will be available with add / and then that name. Maybe that sounds confusing, but let me show you in reality how this works. We additionally should set in our app.json under experiments not only typed routes, but also tsconfig path to true. And once we do this and we have the tsconfig setting, we can change this to add, and it just makes it a lot easier later when we're like a few levels down in our application to get the right components in the right places. Okay, now we can finally get started with our header. As we can see, it's behind this top area. So in order to prevent that, I'm going to use the save area view, which should come from React Native. And I want to make sure that it spans across the whole page. So I will set flex to 1, which means it takes up the entire space. And we see it already moved down the page here, so we respect that area once again in this application. If you want to clearly see what's going on, you can always, of course, set a background color. So if we set this to red, we would see that this is now the save area up there. However, I usually want to use white in here. Now, within the save area view, we can then begin, and we want to start by creating something. Let's try this out. This is just something that definitely doesn't work. So I want to set my custom height in here. So therefore, we're going to define some styles. We're not using any specific styling library. I will just use the React Native style sheet and call create to define my own styles, basically like we were using CSS. So this container should have a specific height actually. I'm gonna give this a height of 60, and I will give it a background color for now of red, so we see what's going on. And then I wanna make sure that I close this correctly and also import the style sheet from React Native. Now we can easily access this because I don't really like to put all my styles in here. So instead of having it like this, we can now say styles.container, and we see our style is applied in here. We could also do this for the save area view if you want to be really strict. Save area. So within that save area, we're going to use flex1 and background white. And then we would refactor this as well into styles.saveArea. Sorry. Oh yeah, I missed the comma. So here is our custom header. We're pretty close to the final result already. Not really. And we're first of all going to focus on the area up here. So that first row with the icons, the text and whatnot. And then we're going to later add the actual search bar below this. So this is our container, and I'm going to wrap the first item that I want to show into a touchable opacity. So a touchable opacity can be used for stuff like buttons, And an touchable opacity has an onPress handler. So you can supply a function that will be called when this is called. And what I want to have inside is an image. So the image element comes from React Native as well. And we're going to set the source just like this. Actually, because we don't really call a function yet, I'm going to remove that for a second. But this is what we want to do. So the problem is with React Native, we can't just say, hey, please use this local asset that is lying here. We have to use it in this require way, as the code runs and is compiled, and it just can't work with a local URL. You can load an image from a web URL with an HTTP request, but not like this. So I'm going to put the bike into the images folder. That's one of the assets bundle, but of course you could also use whatever else you want. And now within the require, I'm gonna say this will be at assets. So again, I can use the path alias images, and under images we should have a bike.png. Most likely this won't work, and I either have to reload or completely stop my server because I added a new file, and usually Expo is mad with me if I do it like that. So I'm gonna close this for now and press I again to make sure that my live reload works correctly again. And then we see that we could not find the file, so that we, yeah, I should probably call this one bike. That makes more sense, right? So stuff like that can happen. Be sure to completely read your error messages in case you make mistakes like I do. Okay, let's do another one. I'm gonna call this one just bike, and I wanna specifically set the width of this to 30 and the height to 30 as well. Gonna apply the style in here, just like we did before. And then we have a little smaller image in here. Also, we already see that within the container, my items are not really aligned in the center. So in our red container here, let's say we want to justify, no, we don't want to justify. I want to align the items in the center. And I want to justify the content with space between. So that would put some space between our items. Maybe I comment this out for now. And usually if we use React Native, we're using a column layout. So that means if we're using a column layout, every item that we place will be put under each other. That is somewhat okay, but in our case, we have this icon, we have the text. So what we want to use instead is a row layout, which means I have item 1 in the row, I have some text in the row, and then I have something else in that row. So that is a row layout. Therefore, we're gonna change the container and say, please use the flex direction row instead. Good. That means I can put something else next to my touchable opacity. So actually, I'm gonna wrap the other stuff in a touchable opacity as well. So I could put now, let's say just for testing, I'm gonna put in home here. And then we would see if I close this correctly, and thanks for doing this one more time, it shows next to it, not below it. However, this is going to be something else. Let's call this the title container, because this is this part. So let's call this title container down here. And for the title container, I wanna make sure that it spans up as much space as possible. Therefore, I will later give this a flex of 1. And we can also say for our container, please use a gap of 20. A gap is used between the items of the flex layout. So we see it put this little gap between those items. In our example, we also need a button right here. So we can add that third button as well. That's going to be a touchable opacity again. And this will be something called the profile button. Profile button. Okay, going to be an empty styling object for now. I'm gonna add the styles here. So style, styles dot profile button. Okay, the profile button does not really have any styling yet, and what I want to display is simply an icon, and we can use the ionicons. So the Expo vector icons are pretty cool. You can use them if you want to, and I want to use the person outline. You can just look up all the available elements, but this one should be available. What's your problem? Import ionicons from Expo Vector Icons. We might have to set the size first. So I'm going to set this to a size of 20. And for the color, I want to use my predefined color. So we should be able to import our colors object from when we had before. And I want to use the color primary. Okay, ionicons, why are you mad? Because there's no closing tag most likely. So let's self-close this. And there we go. So now we have this up here. So I want to now get rid of my red background color for debugging and really see what's going on. So I want to give this row actually a background color of white. That's what we see in the default as well. So here we go, looks better. Now let's try and align our items in the center of that row. So they're right here. That looks better. Additionally, I want to now use my space between, which would assign these items with space between equally between the objects. Additionally, we see on the outside, we could use a bit more space there. So let's use padding horizontal and set this to 20, which brings both items a bit closer here to our view. Now, for the title container, I said it should take up the whole space, but it's also centering the items right now. So I'm gonna give this a flex of 1. Actually, I think we don't need the flex 1 for my title container as it's, oh yeah, we haven't used the title container. That makes sense. So do you see the difference? If we assign the title container here now, styles dot title container, and then I put the flex to 1, it shows up here and aligns the item to the left, which makes a bit more sense. Cool. Now, we need to display the actual title in that title container. So let's add another text in here. We have this one. I'm going with another style here. So styles.title. We can't just apply the text styling to the touchable opacity. It's not like we're using SCSS or something. So we're gonna have to do our own title element in here. I'm doing something like, let's say font size 14. And then we make sure that we have the comma in here. And additionally, I want to use a bit different color. So once again, we can make, so this is color. We can make use of our colors object. I don't want to really use primary. I want to use medium in this case. So we have this light gray text, which should be delivery now. So you can use this high dot. I think this is what it's called. And instead of home, we're using delivery now. Cool. That's a good start. I think our row starts to look really good. We might have one issue as the icon up here needs to have a gray background, but I think we can fix that real quickly. So we do have the profile button. So let's set for the profile button the background to something. Background color should be set to colors.light gray. I think that should look good. Yeah, it's a slight change. You can't really see it a lot. Also, it's too narrow, so we definitely want to do something like a padding here as well. Let's give this a padding of 10. Oh yeah, that makes it a, so yeah, we want to make it a circle, of course, so let's give it a border radius as well. And now we have that rounded button that we can click. That looks good. We can click that as well. We can click that as well. Cool. Now, below the delivery now, we got another row of selected location and this icon. And once again, if we want to do it like that, we should do a simple flex layout. And if you don't want to do an object all the time, just set flex direction in here to row. So that should be fine in this case as well. I don't know what Copilot gives me, but row, but yeah, that's pretty much how it should look like. So I'm gonna set this to London, or could also be Berlin, although in Germany actually we don't have it anymore. And I want to call this one subtitle. So let's go here, and let's put subtitle in it. And for the subtitle, I want to use a bit bigger font size. So something like, I think 18 should be enough. Yeah, 18. We use black, and I want to use the font weight bold. I think we're getting pretty close to what we want to see. You see how this custom header comes together, and I hope it makes sense for you. Now, I only want to change this icon here. I think chevron down is good. We don't really need to use outline though, so it can be a bit bigger. Size 20 is cool. Color should be primary. So we have it like this. And do we need a bit more space between, or how did it look in the original? Well, it's just longer. The tag is just longer, but overall it's the same. The only thing that might be good is to align the items in the center. It's a small change, but I think it's good. I think it should be. It's not justify. I usually get confused with both justify and align. Yeah, but justify is putting it like this, so we only need to align the items in the center. And coming to think, let's refactor this and let's have everything down there. I think that looks just better. So let's just cut this out, call it however you want. I don't know, it's like location name. That's the closest thing. I think that's right. Location name. And then I want to put in my object and a comma, and then we have separated everything nicely. So this is the start of our header. We're going to assign the different actions to the touchable opacity later on. For now, this is all we need. We can click this part, we can click that part, and we could even click that part. Now, if we check out the official design here, we're going to see that we've covered this part. But now it's time to cover this part as well. So I want to display this as well in our custom header. And therefore, I'm just adding a new object, a new component up here. I'm going to call this one the search bar. So you can just do this. We don't need to pass any props to this component. Actually, we don't even need to make this an object. We can simply have the rounded brackets if we just return a view. So let's use something like styles.search container. Close this and make sure, yeah, we have no spelling issues. And then we need to go down here, and for the search container, I want to set the search container height to 60 as well. So I'm gonna hit save, and then we can simply add this. Let's add this after the view. So I'm calling the search bar in here. And then we should see our search bar right here below the container. We don't see it yet. Let's try and give it a background color of red for the beginning again. Nice, there it is. So here is the search bar. I'm going back to the white container. In fact, I don't know if we're going to use white or something else, but let's stick with it. Okay. We're gonna have different elements in here. So we're gonna have search section. So let's put this in our view. We're going up here to our search bar, and then I'm gonna put in another view. So this search container will just have the right view, and with the search section we're going to wrap the actual elements. This is not exactly what I want, so let's call this search section. We're gonna fix that problem in a second. For now, let's add another view so we just get an idea of the basic UI. So what we want to put in first is, of course, the search field. So let's give this also as a name here that we can then reuse. And within the search field, we want to have an icon and a text input. And towards the end, we're going to have this additional button. So let's put this right afterwards. We're gonna actually wrap this now in the Expo Router link component, which is pretty cool. So you can give this an href to a specific page of your application. I hope it's not mad. Yeah, it is mad if I use an empty object. Then let's say we just open /, then it should be fine. This is the cool thing. It's using typed routes, so it's actually checking which routes exist in our app folder. And right now we only have the index route. Because we're just wrapping this around a touchable opacity, we're gonna have to use asChild as well. So now it will just not really add anything, only the routing functionality to this touchable opacity. That Ionicon will actually be options outline. and I'm going to give it the option button styling. So now we got these three styles that we have to implement. So let's put them into our style sheet. I just copied them so I don't forget about the names. We had the search section, we had the search field, and we had the option button, right? So with that in place, we already see our option button. The option button, by the way, it's pretty much the same like the one up there. Is it not aligned like in the official? This is not aligned, I think. Oh, crazy. I think it also has no background, so we can just say like padding 10 and the border radius. Does it actually have like something? I mean, I think this looks good here for clicking. In the official app, I can't really see if it has a background. I don't think so. So our search section, which is the part before here, which has no element yet, let's give it an element. So within the search field part, we of course need text input. We can say placeholder search, yeah. So once again, we have the same problem. We now have that input, but we're using by default a column layout for our search section. So we want to change that. Let's go into the search section and set, please use flex direction row, which puts everything next to each other. Additionally, we want to have a gap between the elements. Maybe 10 in this case is enough. I think this should be fine. Also, this search section should take up most of the space, so I'm telling it, okay, yeah, the search container actually, no, the search container is around it. Then we have the search section, which is basically everything. And then we have the search field. Yeah, the search field should actually take a flex of 1. Yeah, that puts our item towards the end. That makes sense. Search section, once again, padding horizontal, just like we had before, to make sure that the items are nicely aligned. Yes, so that looks a lot better. We have the alignment as well. So align items center. That puts it into the center of this search row. And I don't know if we need the background color, but for now, let's keep it like it is. So the search field will get a nice little background color. It will get light gray, and then we can finally see that, yeah, that is actually a search field now. But I want to give this a nice little border radius. Probably not 50, that's a bit too much Copilot. Border radius of 8 should be just fine. Additionally, I also want to include an icon now in the search field. So if you look up here, that's a pretty common thing to have this icon in the front. And also, of course, we can change the default placeholder. So I want to call this one restaurants, groceries, dishes. All right, that should be fine. Also, that text input should get some styling. So let's call this styles.input. And I'm gonna put the input styling somewhere here. Okay, good. So for that input, we now see that this field is definitely too small. So I'm going ahead with a padding of 10, but I think, yeah, it actually looks pretty good. This is also using black. I want to use a different color, so I'm gonna set my color here to how does medium look like? That's too, nah, I think, let's see. I think I had another like medium dark value. I think this should be, this is a bit darker, yeah. Let's use medium dark. Yeah, sometimes we need to play around a bit with those values. Okay, let's hit save everywhere, and yes, that's a nice medium color. I think our header is coming together really nicely. I don't know about you, but I now definitely also want to have a search icon. So let's already add some styling for a search icon, and we're just gonna place that search icon in front of our text input. So within this search field, I'm going to add my search icon, and it should use the, I don't know, search outline. Yeah, well, we could also use something like iOS search. Yeah, that's a bit bigger. Size 20 is cool. Colors should be just medium, so then it blends more nicely with our placeholder. However, for the search icon, we now see that again we have the same problem with that search field. It's using a column flex layout. So I'm going with flex direction row. And again, items are not aligned, so align items center. That looks better. And for the search icon, I might want to give it just a bit of padding. So let's just say padding 10. Oh, that's actually a lot. Maybe just padding of 4 or padding, just padding horizontal. I don't know, it should be just padding left. I think we should just use padding left in this case, because to the right it already has enough padding. Yeah, that looks good. I think we have done a pretty good job with that header. If we compare it to this one, it looks really, really nice. I don't really see a big difference. Maybe they use some different colors here and there, but overall we have the click functionality to all of these items. We have an input field. We're not really using the input here, but it's pretty easy to just assign a state to the text input and react to the changes. And actually we can use the text input not from React Native gesture handler, but just from React Native. That's fine as well. That means we have finished the first section, and now it's time to talk about the different actions that we have to assign, like the filter here or the bottom sheet modal that should appear here. In this part, we're now going to implement a bottom sheet modal. So if we click in our application somewhere up here, a bottom sheet modal should open that looks like this. So nothing really fancy. This is a standard bottom sheet modal that is triggered by an action. The problem is how we set this up with React Native, because there's no built-in component for this. So we have to get a bit creative and use a package called React Native Bottom Sheet. This is actually one of those packages that is like used by most of the community to create bottom sheets that look just like this. The only problem is that we have a somewhat complicated setup as we click here in the header component and we want to display it at the bottom. So we have to wrap it in a component and pass around some references, which makes it a bit more challenging to set it up. Nonetheless, we can get started by first of all installing it. That's pretty easy. So let's do this, bring up our terminal again, and then we're going to install the Gorhome bottom sheet. Additionally, we need to install with Expo React Native Reanimated, which we will also use later for some cool animations, and the React Native gesture handler. So this will hopefully set this up correctly in our application. I just want to make sure by checking our Babel config that, yeah, it wasn't included. That's what I thought. So under plugins, we want to add the React Native Reanimated plugin here. And as I've changed this now, I assume that I have to refresh my application as well. Additionally, we can also get into our layout file. So this is the file that is usually like the app.tsx that is always called initially where your app is bootstrapped, but with a file-based routing, it's a bit different. We only have this top layout file that we can use for that. However, what we want to do is we want to wrap our whole application into a bottom sheet modal provider. No, I wanted to do this one here. As we need to call it from different components, and therefore we're going to wrap this first of all around our app. Again, I'm going to, yeah, we already see this. I forgot to add reanimated. That's a good issue here. So I'm starting npx expo again, going with for iOS, and then usually it messes up the live reload. So I want to open it again and make sure we're connected correctly with live reload. And if the error is gone, oh, did you forget to add reanimated Babel plugin in the Babel? No, I actually did. This is good that it happens right now, because I think sometimes, especially here with reanimated, we have to pass --clear to our expo command, as that will clear our cache of any other builds. So hopefully at this point it should open. It might take a second longer to build, but usually that should get rid of the issue. There we go. Okay, we got the bottom sheet provider. Let's create a new component that we call bottom sheet. So bottom sheet.tsx goes into our components folder. And I'm once again using the tiny little helper to create this initial component. It's going to be called bottom sheet. And it returns something. It will actually return a bottom sheet modal. And this will require us to implement some functionality. I don't know if there's like some default stuff that we could probably just add. Yeah, it's missing snap point. So that's the first thing. We're gonna have to define up until where in our view this snaps. And we can define those snap points up here. And we're gonna use memo to memorize the value, as this is not going to change, and we can just save a bit of the performance in our application by wrapping it like this. In our case, we will actually have only one breakpoint. I'm gonna add this at 50%. Then we have an empty dependencies array, and then we can pass the snap points to, is it snap points? Yeah, there we go. Okay, I assume so, yeah. Something else is missing. Property children is missing. So I think we don't have anything in it yet, right? So let's just put in a view and the text bottom sheet and finish the view. Okay, so it looks good. So we have the default implementation of the bottom sheet. Now we want to call this from our custom header. And as I said, this is going to be somewhat more complicated. So I want to add the bottom sheet modal now in my save area view here. So I'm going to add the bottom sheet just like this. First of all, I think this won't really change anything. Now we want to, of course, toggle this bottom sheet or display it on click of a specific button or area. So that means we need a new function. I'm going to call this open modal, and this will do something. Yeah, we can log open modal. Actually, we're going to add this to the first touchable opacity. So on press, we're going to call open modal. And we're doing the same for the second touchable opacity, as those both should just open it. Okay, cool. Now, this should, of course, lock the value, but we don't really want to just lock this. Now we need to create a reference and pass this to our bottom sheet to actually use it in the right way. So we're now creating a reference. We call this bottom sheet ref, and we use ref for that from React. We use the type bottom sheet modal, which comes from the Gorham bottom sheet modal. And now we can pass this ref to our bottom sheet modal, so it will then later be correctly assigned and displayed. Now we should see a new issue or a warning. Function components cannot be given references. Attempt to this will fail. Did you mean to use React forward ref? And that is a nice warning and tells us exactly what we need to do. So our bottom sheet now needs to be wrapped in a forward ref. That's just a specific React thing because it's otherwise not working with functional components as we use them here. So we are wrapping this now with forward ref. We're gonna make some brackets around our bottom sheet, and to the forward ref we get access to props that are usually passed to something and the actual ref. And normally TypeScript will complain about something, so we can create our own type in here and call this ref, and this will be the bottom sheet modal type. I'm going to add this as the type for forward ref in here. So now we have the ref with the right type. And this ref is now assigned to the bottom sheet using ref, and hit save. And then we save in all the places. Let's see. Gonna reload. Yes, that looks good. So what happens if I click here? We can't see the modal yet. There are a few settings that we might have to add to the bottom sheet modal in case to actually display it. Or we're still not using it. Yeah, that's a good point. So let's change that one. So instead of just logging something, we're now going to use the current reference and call present on the bottom sheet modal. And I hope, yes, there we go. My head is probably covering this. So this section, let me put this to the other side. So we're quickly swapping things around in here. And then we can see it. I can also close this here. And we now see that we got this nice bottom sheet working. And that's already 50% of the way to it. So if you have some coffee, grab it, take a sip. You know, that was actually a lot easier than I initially did it. You don't want to see how I initially implemented this. Okay, we got the bottom sheet. We can display it with passing the reference. We probably need a function to dismiss it because we right now can only pull it down. And we need to put some items into it. We don't need this view anymore, but this is what we want to eventually implement in that view. Just a few UI elements actually. Okay, let's get to our bottom sheet and implement and make sure that it looks like this. So we also need some sort of backdrop. We don't really want to have these rounded borders. So you see here is a rounded border. This is actually just straight. We don't want the notch. So there are a few changes we have to apply, but that's not going to be a big issue for us. Let's get into this. I'm going to put this here. And the first thing I want to add is that I actually want to disable this because in the actual app, this is not working. So you can set the over drag resistance factor to something like 0. And if you set it to 0, you see there's no more over dragging possible. I also said we want to have a backdrop component. So for the backdrop component, you can just supply whatever component you want to have. So we can just call this render backdrop. And this will return a function. So I'm going to use callback, which gives us a bit better performance, as it will use and memorize the value here again if it is a function. So that's basically the same like use memo. So use callback is usually used for functions. We can now use, I think, the bottom sheet backdrop. And to initialize this, we need to pass some props to it. Let's see. I will just use any for now in here. And we can pass the props with a spread operator. Can we put this to 2 lines, please? Yeah, that's perfect. Line break. Thank you for that. This is the bottom sheet backdrop. And we need to tell in which cases this bottom sheet backdrop appears. And we also need to assign it to the actual component here. So let's see. If I bring this up, there's not really a big change. As we, I think, haven't or can't see it yet. So within my bottom back, can we just do it in another line? What I want to say is I want to appear on index and disappear on index. That's what I want to set. So it appears on index 0. So in our first breakpoint, it should appear and should disappear on index -1. And now we see it appears on our first breakpoint, which is at 50% of the view, and it disappears when it's gone. So -1. Maybe we could just also, we need to use -1, otherwise it won't work. But nice. We could also, of course, customize the backdrop, but I'm not really interested in that right now. We also need a button to close this, so let's get that by using the hook. That's actually pretty cool. So we can call the use bottom sheet modal hook here and destructure it to use the dismiss function. And I could now simply add a button in here from React Native that on press calls our dismiss function. We usually need to do it like this now. And let's see, I open it. And it dismisses. So we have the basic functionality, and we even have a nice backdrop which automatically dismisses our backdrop, our model. Now we can finally implement the real view. So just as a reminder, where is my preview? Here it is. We have the dark background, so we now just need these 2 buttons up here. This will actually toggle another screen or open another stream, and confirm will also be just our dismiss functionality. So maybe we're gonna just start by that and use a touchable opacity from the bottom sheet. No, not really. And the bottom sheet on press will call the dismiss one. I'm going to give it text confirm. And then we need to wrap this in some cool styling. So once again, we create our styles using style sheet from React Native .create. And let's say this is the button text. So the button text should have something like color white. We can use the hex value. And for the button text, font weight of bold, yeah, maybe bold. And then we need to close all the brackets. And at this, style equals styles dot button text, of course, not styles. So now we have it. We still need, we need the background for our touchable opacity. So let's use styles.button. This is going to be our, well, let's call it generic button styling. This is interesting as we're going to use for the background color our primary color and make it wrap across the whole row. So with this, it already looks pretty good. But of course, I want to have some padding. I think 20 is too much. We're going with 16. Yeah, that looks good. We also want to have a little border radius of 4 to make it rounded. And of course, we need margin to the sides as well if we actually want to see those rounded. So that looks already better. And align the items in the center. Align items center. Puts the confirm in the middle. Now, if we implement the other stuff, the button will automatically be at the bottom, so we don't really have to care about that too much right now. But what I want to care about is actually the background color of my bottom sheet. And I think we can set this right here. I think we can set the background style to something, okay, let's see what this results. Oh, that gives us a pretty dark one. No, I don't want to have that. I want to use my colors.light gray instead, so that's a nicer gray. And also, I want to get rid of the border radius as set initially, so I'm going to set the border radius here back to 0, and that gets us rid of all of these things. I think that already looks like a nice bottom sheet. So you see, it's pretty easy to customize it. I also don't want to show this little notch or indicator or whatever. I think they call it so handle indicator style. I'm just going to tell this one display none. That should most likely hide it, right? Yeah, now it's gone. Perfect. The view should use something like a content container. So let's put in some view. This will use flex1. And we are assigning it here as the style. So now we should take up the whole space of the bottom sheet with our custom view in here. And the first part is going to be these toggles. So the two little toggles, delivery and pickup. We won't make them toggleable. But we're going to assign the different styles anyway, and you're going to see that it would be pretty easy to switch out the styling afterwards. So we're going to wrap this in a view. I'm going to use styles.toggle, and we will most likely have more styling. So we're going to have a toggle active, and we're going to have a toggle inactive. Exactly, that's what we're going to use. Now, for the toggle, you can imagine that those should be used the flex direction row again. So we can already set this to flex direction row, and we're gonna have these like two buttons inside. I'm just going to make the first one, yeah, that could be a touchable opacity. It actually doesn't matter if it's a touchable opacity or not. So let's close it. The first one will be delivery, the second one will be touchable opacity using the inactive one, and the text pickup. Nice, you figured that one out pretty well. Additionally, in my toggle, I want to align them in the center. So there we go. I want to put a little gap between them. So let's do this. Here we have a gap, and I want to have some margin to the bottom of, oh no, 20 or maybe a bit more. I think in the official way there quite a lot of space here. So now we just need for the active and the inactive the correct styling, and the active one had a primary background, and I think, let's see, yeah, pretty much like this. It should most likely also have like a white text, right? but for that we probably need something else. Yeah, we can let's just do it in here. I don't want to do another one like let's do it. Okay, you want to do clean style? Yeah, you want to clean. Okay, it's okay. Active text. I'm with you. Of course, it's better if we put everything in here. So toggle active, and we have the active text. Should use a white color and some bigger font weight. We don't always have to use bold, by the way. We can also use a number instead. So now that looks okay, but the toggle active of course needs more padding. So let's go with a padding of 8 here. And then of course we also need a border radius. I think 4 won't do it. I think we need really something heavy here. Yeah, to make it like a pill. And I will try and use a width in here. I don't know if this works, but let's set the width of 100. Yeah. Then we have like this fixed size. We could also have like margin. Could we use just padding horizontal? Like 30. Yeah, that would pretty much give us the same result. I mean, that looks good as well. I really like it. I feel like our toggle is using justify center. Something is not centered here. My pickup is not really centered, right? So for the toggle inactive, we kind of want to use the same. Only that for pickup, we have a background color of just like nothing. And the text for that is the primary color. So active text, this is the inactive text, and I will use our primary color. So it's pretty nice that we defined those in the beginning. We can just reuse our colors. That's really a good pattern, and make sure that like if you really want to change it at some point, you just have to change it in one place. Actually for the inactive text, I don't want to have this to use like a font of 700. I mean, it could use something, but not like that. Okay, this looks pretty good. What is the gap of our toggle? I feel that's too much. Yeah. That should be fine. So now if you click it, you could easily toggle between them with a bit of additional code, but we're gonna now focus on the rest of this view. So then in the screenshot, we had your location followed by a little item, and then pretty much the same again here. So let's add, first of all, a text element, and we call this your location. Okay, this of course needs some styling. So styles.subheader. I think this is a right term for this. Let's copy this and let's find the subheader. I'm just going to add it down here. And for the subheader, we're going to use a font size of 16. And well, do we want to really use bold? Or let's try like 600 is like semi-bold. And some margin, I think we usually use 16. Yeah, that makes it look good. We can of course already add the second one if we want to. So that was arrival time. Here we go. And then we just need to put the items in between. Now, they will actually also be wrapped with a link component from the Expo router again, as they will toggle something. So this one right here will eventually toggle our location search. I don't really have that page yet, so I will just use it like this. And then close the component already so I don't forget about it. I'm going to put a touchable opacity in. We don't need an on-press event, as the link will handle all of that. But what we need is to create this sort of item-like view. So there's no real component again for this in React Native that we can use out of the box, but we're gonna make that work anyway. Maybe we're just gonna put it here for a second, so then we can switch between the preview and it's actually a good idea. I should have made up that one before. So let's put in a view into that touchable opacity. Yeah, that view will use some styling. How do we want to call that? Like item? Yeah, that's probably item. And for that item, we're gonna use a flex direction row again. Flex direction row. We also want to have a gap between the items here. And we need an icon, a text, and another icon. That's pretty much the setup for this row. So what did I say? I have a text. That text should be, that actually doesn't need a lot. And the text should basically just span across this and use everything. So current location would be the text. I'm gonna put an icon in front of it. That could just be location outline, size 20, colors, not primary. They should actually use medium. And then we're gonna have another icon towards the end, which would be the chevron forward. Chevron forward, and that should actually use the primary color. So we see we got that. And if we now wanna align this, we got different options as we've used before for the item. So first of all, I wanna align my items in the center. Align items center, so that move the current location a tiny bit down. I want to use a slightly different background color here. So I'm going to use a white color. You see, maybe I'm going to do this with red for the second, so then we can see it a bit better. Now we will simply make sure that the current location is taking up actually most space. And we can do this by simply giving that item a flex of 1, and then we'll just expand to the full available space. So here we go, flex 1, and it's taking up the space. Now we're just gonna change this, and where was that? Yeah, where we use red, and we're of course going to use white instead. And I don't know, do we have like a border, or is this fine? There's probably a tiny border, so I don't know. Do we want to put this, where would we put this? I think we would put this under the item. Let's see, we're gonna give this a border color of light gray. Oh, that is not this, and this is here. And then we would also have to set the border width. I'm actually going to set this to medium. Yeah, that's probably too dark. Border, let's just use border width, then it's using top and bottom. And then we can use something like gray. Yes, I think that's perfect. Yeah, I think we got it. So we got this item, and now we can simply replicate this. We're not going to use another link here. I mean, we can. I will just put this down here. So this one should simply say now instead of current location. It should not use the location outline, but say a stopwatch outline. And if we hit save, we have our location now, and we have the arrival time. And I think with that, we have finished our nice bottom sheet. So we've integrated this with a different component and extracted the code for the bottom sheet into its own component, so we can reuse it basically across every screen by using forward ref. We might have a bit too much padding, but I think actually our buttons look better than the official ones. We will later attach more functionality here, as this will bring us to another screen, but confirm already closes this. And before we talk about this, because we're gonna need the Google API here and include some cool maps, before we do that, let's tackle another screen, which is the filter up here. Now we are implementing a cool modal page that will allow us to select some filters. This is what we want to do, and this should happen once we click on this button up here. So this button here, this one, should trigger a modal just like this. Okay, I need to fix my arrows. Okay, the cool thing is this is going to be pretty easy because we can use this directly with the Expo router. We just have to set the type for this page and then we can implement it. Additionally, we're gonna get into creating some cool checkboxes, and afterwards we also have to add a little animation here to this section. So this is going to be really, really interesting. Let's get started by adding a new page. I'm going to add a new group in here, so we can do this with brackets. This won't really change a lot, but it just helps to like structure my application, and we can group stuff together. I'm going to call this one filter.tsx, and I'm going to call this one filter. Now I will go back to the layout, and within the layout we can now add a new screen. So we're going ahead with stack.screen. The name for this is going to be the path to that file. So with our file-based routing, it's under modal/filter. We don't need to add a component here. That's actually all we need. And now I could already call this from my custom header. So within the custom header, let's find the place. This was here in the search bar. So I'm going to add modal/filter, and we actually get the route here. And then we see this now pushes the page forward. No, this is not what I want to do. What I want to do is I want to display this actually as a modal component. So therefore we have to supply some options here again. And within those options, I want to say that the presentation of this page should be a modal. If I set this, it immediately changes the presentation and we get this right out of the box. So this is really, really cool. I will also set my header title in here. So I'm going to set this to filter instead and not have this like the default name of that route. So now we have filter. I don't want to have the header shadow. So I will call header shadow visible false. So that removes this little shadow we had before in here. Also, in this case, the whole page is gray. So we're going to apply the same gray color to my header. And we can create a header style here, header style. And for the header style, I want to not use a transparent background, but instead go back to my colors file and select the light gray color. Header style, background, light gray. Maybe this is already light gray and the page is not using light gray. Or we might have to reload. Let's check. I can't completely see if this is light gray already or not, but we're gonna check this out soon. Additionally, I will add a header left component. So I want to have a little X here to close this. I mean, we can swipe it down, but usually you will still see this in applications that they have an additional button there for people who don't know. You can swipe the page down. So touchable opacity goes in here from React Native. On press, I want to go back. We probably have to implement that in a second. For now, I don't really need the text. Let's directly go for an Ionicon. So Ionicon's name should be like close outline. Then we don't really have a text and we can close this in here. I cannot find the name, so please add the import. And now we should already see it. Yeah, that's very small. We of course need this a bit bigger. So let's change the size of it to 28 and let's use the color primary. Okay, so perfect. Looks pretty close to this. We just need to make sure that once we got the background of this page, that the background colors are aligned. And then the close is actually closing this page. So we can inject our navigation with a hook here. So let's say cons navigation equals use navigation, and that will allow us to easily access it. I mean, we could have also just wrapped it in a link component. That wouldn't have made a big change. So now I'm just going to say navigation go back, and with that in place we can click it and we would just move back. So we already have two cool things in our app. We have a modal and we have a bottom sheet modal. So that's pretty nice. Now let's continue with our filter page. On that filter page, we're gonna have to do a few things. Let's close this and just focus on this page. So we have this area up here, which consists of a few items, and then we have the actual categories. And we're gonna go the categories from the data. So I forgot to add this. I will now add this finally. You can download this or grab this below. This is basically a list of filters with a count. I don't know, are we using the count? Yeah, I think. Just an array of some data that we will use to display that list. But let's get started by first of all creating our styles object using stylesheet.create. You could please just add my import automatically. That would be really, really cool. And of course I need some sort of container, and I'm going to apply this styles.container right out here. This will now use flex1, so that will make sure we're using the full page. I want to give this some padding, as everything on that page actually had padding, so we can just put the whole page under some padding. And for the background color, I will now use the same gray that our header is using. So I'm going to import colors and light gray, and yes, now we have it smooth without any shadow or border below that header area. The next thing we need is, do we want to add the footer first? Yeah, maybe let's add the footer because that one's actually somewhat easy. So I'm going to say view style styles.footer. So that should be at the bottom of our view. Yes, you can have a you can have a text in there, Copilot, if that makes you happy. But what I want to do for my footer is I will actually give it an absolute position. Do we have to? Well, we have a list inside, so it's kind of above it. I think it makes the most sense, yeah, to position this one absolute. If we position this one absolute, we should also give it a fixed position, so bottom, left, right, 0. And I'm going to give it a height of, let's say, 100. So then we already see the footer come up here. In terms of the background color, let's give it like a medium color, then we can see the difference. So this is our footer area right now. Within, what we need is a button. So I'm going to use a touchable opacity again. And on click, this will have the text done. And that touchable opacity, we don't really need this actually. We need to close this, of course. And have we not added it yet? Now we have. This will get the styles.full button. So this will once again be a button that is visible with a complete width, just having a bit of margin and padding here and there. So let's add this. I don't know, have we used this before on my other page? For the bottom sheet, maybe is there like a full button? Maybe this one, but then maybe also not. Yeah, let's go with our own styling. So for the background color, we're using the primary color and we will use the full width available. So this is the done button. Looks perfect. Not really. That should once again have some padding. So let's give this a padding of 16 so the button becomes bigger. You want to align the items in the center, that done button, and of course we need footer text. So that text should be use the white color. In fact, I don't have that in colors. For white, we'll just use white like this. And set my font weight to bold and the font size to something like 16. I think that should look good. And now we're gonna apply that to our text here. So styles.footer text. I always make the same mistake. Okay, now it already looks like this. Becomes better. But of course, our full button needs what do we need? We need a border radius, and our footer should probably just have some padding. So for the footer, oops, what was that? I'm gonna add padding of 10. Yeah, then it makes it stand out, and then we can also see that if we now apply a border radius of whatever 8, it should look like this. Good, I think I like this. I really like it. Of course, our footer should not really have colors medium for the background color, but instead just white background. And if we observe this, we see there is a little shadow at the top. And we can create this with a little elevation here on our button. So we're going to use elevation, and then we're going to use a shadow color of black. If we apply that, nothing will really change, because we still have to set the shadow opacity and the shadow radius, and boom, we got the shadow up there. You can also directly affect the shadow offset if you want to. So if you would do it like this, it will look a bit different. I think this looks pretty cool. Like, this is really cool. So on clicking our done button, we of course want to close our filter as well. So we can just get the same hook in here. Which means we can say const navigation equals use navigation. What's the way to like tell Copilot to not do what it's doing? There should be a way. But anyway, we're gonna attach this, and then on press of the button, we're going to do the same as we did before. Navigation, go back. Cool. So yes, perfect. Okay, we got the modal. Now we just need to implement the content. The content is going to be interesting, as I said, as we have this list of items and the top. The list will be displayed in a component called flat list. There are different ways. You could also use a scroll view, but flat list is a bit more performant. There's also a flash list component, but that makes everything a bit more complicated, and I don't really want to rely on that now already. So we're going to use a flash list, and we can probably already add that flash list in our view. So instead of having the filter here, I'm now adding the flat list. The flat list needs some data. So this is where the data comes in. Yeah, not this data. The data comes in from the file that I've shown you a second ago. So we're gonna add an import for our categories from assets, data, filter JSON. That's just where I place this. And then I'm gonna say, hey, please use the categories for your data. Additionally, the flat list needs a function to render every single item. So there's a function render item, and we're going to create our own little function because that will just give us a better structure. You can create one called render item, and we're gonna use the type list render item and a category. Do we actually, let's add this at the top. So this is an interface for a category, could have a name, account, and could be checked. So this is optional, and then we're gonna say this is the category of that item. And within, do we actually need functionality in here? Not really, so we should be able to just wrap it in regular brackets. And we're gonna return a view. A view item.name. Is it actually name? Yeah. In fact, we don't need the return, right? Good. So let's try and pass this to our flat list here. And let's hit save. And text must be, yeah, I think that's good. I think I fixed that one, hopefully. Okay, that's a good one. That usually means somewhere in your code, yeah, you have a character without the text element. So here we go. We have this nice scrollable list. Before that list, I don't want to show these items. And in order to show them, it's a bit more complicated. If we just put them in here, it could work, but then something is not scrollable. So the usual way, if you have a flat list in your page and you have something above or below, is to just use the list header or the list footer component. So we're gonna do another component in here. I'm going to call this one the item box. And just like before, this will be some sort of view. I'm actually going to call this one styles.item container. So we're going to give this some styling. Yeah, there will be items at some point. And I'm going to add this already down here for the item container. And now we can pass this new item box component as the header component to the flat list. So list header component is now our item box. So that means the item is displayed above the flat list. And now that the item box is visible here, the first item, so this item is actually not part, the actual list starts down here, where we see SI and all the other things. We can implement that little box up here. So we already gave it the item container. Now I'm just gonna put in a few touchable opacity elements. They will all have style. Let's say styles.item. I don't know if this is maybe the same styling like we had before. I actually assume so. So let's go to the bottom sheet, and we had this item styling here. So I'm gonna grab this and add it in here. This could probably be the same item styling, or it could work. It gives us this white thing with a background. Probably not completely correct, but also not bad. So we have a gray background. We probably don't need that much padding. We just need some padding vertical, and I think 8 should be enough. But let's try. And also this is going to have only a border bottom width. So we can say that we only want to have a bottom border and not somewhere else. Now I think that makes more sense. Let's try and put in some stuff. We basically, I mean, we could just get it from our bottom sheet. So that item really looked pretty much the same. So we had the ionicon, then we had some text. So let's put this here into this one. We don't need the additional view styling. So ionicons from Expo Vector icons. And well, that looks not too bad. The first one will be sort. And if we look at this, we see, okay, chevron forward, maybe a bit bigger, like 22. But the first one should be gray, and that's good. I'm just going to use something like arrow down outline. So this is our first one. This item styling, I feel like the item container should have more padding. Yeah, the general surrounding item container needs some styling. So let's give that item container some own styling. I'll give it a white background, and I definitely want to give this container some padding as well. So then, yeah, that makes stand out the items, and the border looks like this. That is good, that is good. We also want a border radius for the white thing, and then I want to add margin bottom, so our list just starts there. Actually, there also should be like a header text for the categories below. I think we could add that right here. So that header should definitely have a bigger font size, like 16, font weight bold, and also margin bottom at least, let's use 16 as well. And then we can already wrap that up in here and put it somewhere below these. That actually belongs somewhere else, like that's a good case again. So we're going to, yes, put this in here, call this category. So it would display in here, but the problem is I don't want to have it in there. I want to have it after the view. And that usually complains because JSX expression must have one parent element, and you can just use an empty fragment in those cases around this. And then we would have our categories here and the sort up there. And with that, we just need to replicate this block 3 times. So second one was like hygiene rating. What do we like? Fast food outline. Then we had, what was that? Offers and dietary. Offers, dietary. Dietary gets like nutrition, and the offers gets a price tag. And let's check, and I think that looks pretty good. We could probably remove the border bottom as well, or from the last item, as it's not really super great, but at the same time it's also not really bad. How do I feel about this? I feel like the items in general could use a bit more padding. I don't know. Let's check out the item again. We have a gap of 8. I think the item gap could be bigger, yeah. Giga. And let's use something like, well, maybe 10, maybe 12 is a bit too much. That should be okay. So I don't know if I want to use the bottom border or not. I will just keep it in for now. We don't have to be like pixel perfect. So we can scroll that area. We have the button down here. And now it's time to talk about the flat list again. So for our flat list, we now need to render all these items in a nicer way because that looks horrible. So we're going to do them as these items with a checkbox at the end. We already have our list render item function, so we're going to give that one a style, and that will definitely be like styles.row. So we certainly need a row layout or setup for our flat list items. So I'm pretty sure that at this point I want to use a row flex direction of row. I will also align my items. Yeah, I will most likely have some padding. Actually, the padding doesn't matter too much in this case. But I want to align the items and I want to give it some padding around this as well. And also the background color should be set to white. Now that gives us already a bit nicer list. We see we have a problem at the bottom, but we're going to take care of that later. Or actually, we could just easily fix this if we just put a view in here. So if we just put a view in here and say style height 80 or 90, I don't know, and then close it. So, hey, what's your problem? That shouldn't be a problem. How did I mess up my live reload so hard? Oh, I love it. Let's see, I'm just going to press I again, should bring it up. I don't know, sometimes I really, like, I don't know. Text, oh, it's again this one, the text strings one. Yeah, better. So now it has like an additional component in there. So a little fakey here. Actually, I don't like, maybe we should just do like 80. Yeah, I think that's better, or even like 78. I mean, I don't want to do pixel perfect, but it still should be like pretty epic. Yeah, I think this is cool. Okay, and now we need to do the rows. So name, count, checkbox, and separator. We can do that. So let's see, our render item is pretty boring still. We can certainly do better. And we need one additional package, which is the React Native bouncy checkbox. This is a cool component for creating fancy checkbox just like this, because the default React Native checkbox, it's not that cool. You don't really want to use that. So let's install the React Native bouncy checkbox instead. And let's put that to use in our page. So we're going to add the import for the bouncy checkbox up here. And then we will see how we can use this. So yeah, this is the basic usage and there's an advanced usage. I don't know exactly which kind of usage we need. Well, let's see. We have the text with the item name, and we can actually at the same time display item.count as well. So let's put it in here, item count, and it should be in regular brackets displayed. Okay, additionally the text should have a different styling, so it should be like a bit light gray. I would say this is like the item text. So let's put in an item text down here, and that item text is most likely taking up most of the width, so we're going to give it a flex of 1 again. And probably, yeah, actually I think this should be enough. Do we need, what's the color? What the color? Is it, I don't know. I'm just gonna, I think I'm gonna stick to my black color right now. Let's just try and put in our bouncy checkbox here now. So we have the row, we have the item text, and now, yeah, let's add the bouncy checkbox. I don't know if Copilot is giving us the accurate implementation here. I'm just going to try. This is not too bad. This is actually not too bad. Let's unwrap what we've implemented. So we have a fill color. Fill color is, of course, the primary color. The unfilled color is white. That also totally makes sense. Then we have some icon style. The icon style is also using that border, but probably we need to change that a bit. Especially catching the state here is somewhat tricky. We're gonna have to talk about that in a second. Also, I would like to give this icon style somewhat different. So I will not only use a border color, I will use a border radius of just 4. So that should give us a box instead. And I think I will go with a border width of 2. So that gives us a bit bigger box. Or maybe I'm just gonna stick to 1. Actually, I think it might be enough. So this is the icon style for the pressed state. We also have an icon style or an inner icon style that I want to set. So I'm going to set that to colors as well and the border radius to 4. So now we have both states covered. Let's look at this one. Actually, I think we're going with a border width of 2. Yeah, I think we're going with that. And now it also works with this bigger box. So I think we made a nice job already with this list. However, we now really want to get the state of these items, and that's not that easy. In fact, I mean, it should be easy, but apparently it isn't. So this component manages its state itself, But if you want like to have a list of the checked and unchecked items, or if you want to check them and update the component, it's getting to be really challenging. And that is somewhat of a pity. So what we're going to do is we will now pass disable built-in state. So now it's not catching any of our state anymore, and we will manage this ourselves. So on our page, I'll now say const items set items. So we're going to introduce a little state in our application. Use state. This is going to be an array of categories, and it's just using our data. Now that also means I want to pass these items to my flat list instead of just the plain JSON data. With that in place, we can hit save, and for now I think nothing should change. It's still the same data passed to this. However, we can now select items. And we want to do this, let's see, by passing a new function to onPress. So onPress, we can check if the current item is checked, and we can check this by using the index. We're going to grab the index up here, so we're going to destructure the list render item in not only the category item but now also the index, and we can check if the current box is checked by using items at the position index dot checked. This also means we have a new way of setting the actual checked value. So we're going to set is checked to item, well, not to item.checked, because I want to use my state instead. So I'm going with items at the index dot checked, or at the position index dot checked. Actually, we had that function, so I'm going to remove it. Now, when I click on one of these, I need to update my state. And I will do this by creating a new array. So I'm going to call this updated items. And therefore I want to iterate through all the items that I have. I don't think I need the index for that. And if the item name is equal to that name, we're going to set the item check. Will this work? I'm not entirely sure about you, Copilot. I mean, we can give it a try. But what I want to do afterwards is, of course, calling set items with the updated items. Let's see. Okay, Copilot actually figured that out correctly, and we're once again able. Now, you don't really see a difference to the built-in state. However, with this approach, we are able to create a function now. So let's call this const clear or handle clear all. And with that function, we are now able to update our items by going through each of them and setting the checked to false. And once we've done this, we can then simply call set items with the updated items. And that would actually work. Let's see if we can just put a simple button somewhere. I'm just going to put this above the flat list for testing. Yeah, whatever. Just make it a button. Button from React Native. So let's see, I got the button, and if I hit this, it clears all the items. So now we're able to correctly check the state and from code also clear this. And this will become more important soon, as we're gonna add another button. Or also you can think of this if you would like to pass this down to another component, which we don't do right now because we're actually not going to use the category filtering. But then you would have to know which of your items are checked, and then you now got this list of all the items, including their state and the checked value, and it's not only managed internally in the bouncy checkbox. So with that in place, we have finished 90% of this filter, but now the last fancy thing is that we want to animate this button. There is actually a built-in animation package for React Native, but usually what you want to do is you want to use React Native Reanimated for more powerful native animations, because this is actually not just using some web APIs, this is using really native code to run your animations, which is a lot better in performance. The good thing is we've already installed React Native Reanimated with our Expo application in the beginning. And what we now want to do is we want to create a separation here. So we want to have two buttons. We want to have a button to clear all and the done button. And those should actually divide up the space. So in the center, there should be a divider, or there should be nothing. So in case we have something selected, we're going to have a button here and a button here. And in case we have nothing selected, we will just have this one take up the full width and expand to the full width. Now, this is easier said than done, but let's get started. To understand that, we first of all add a bit additional state to check if we have selected items. So this will be an empty array of categories, I think we can keep it like this. Then I will also add a new value, so I'm going to call this flexible width, and this is now using a use shared value from React Native Reanimated. So we're basically adding some styling to an additional button, and I think not to that button. That button will just take up the available space. And that button will get like a style sheet, but a bit different way. So the way we do it now with this flexible width is that we can animate that value, and we will pass an animated styles to our new component using use animated style. And within use animated style, we will now return an object where we'll actually use the width and then the value of that object. And whenever we change the flex width, we would animate that on our button. It's actually a lot easier than you might think to achieve something like this. You just need to play around with a few values and make sure that it works correctly. So let's go down here. We have our footer here. And I'm now going to wrap this in another view. I will give this a style of styles.button container, and this button container will now have a row layout once again, because we're going to have two buttons in there. So it will have flex direction row. As always, we're going to have a little gap. Let's use 12, and I will use justify content. Actually, not space between. That didn't really work well. So animating that, it didn't completely work out as I was hoping for. So now I'm going to wrap this around my two touchable opacities, and that one here will have the text clear all. This will also not have the style footer text, I think, but this will have like outlined button text. And this other one will actually have an outline button. It's because that button should not look the same. It should be a bit different. So the outline button will have a border color of our primary color and a border width of, I think just 0.5 is enough in this case. And I'm going to give the outline text. Copilot, come on, you can do this. Outline button text. That one should have colors primary, font weight bold, font size 16, something like that. Let's see, we need the comma, and now, okay, that button is not perfectly aligned yet, so align items center. And of course as well justify content center. Additionally, we need the border radius. We should use the same like that full button. What is the full button using? Border radius 8, yeah. So outline button should have 8 as well in that case. And do we need anything else? I think that looks good for now. The only problem is that within the row, these buttons actually don't really take up the space that they should. So initially, or I'm going to use a fixed value here now. We're gonna check with a use effect hook now. So with use effect, we can react and run something when any of the dependencies here changes. So we have an array of dependencies after the actual callback function. So when our items changes, which means the state has changed because I clicked something, and now it once again becomes important that we did not use the built-in state. When this changes, I want to check, did we previously had something selected? So I'm going to say has selected, and I'm going to say selected.length greater than 0. And now, did this change is the question, because if we already have the button, we don't really need to change anything. But if the new selected items, and we can get them by filtering all the items and checking. Actually, I want to get. Do I want to get this like this? I mean, it should be fine. So const new selected would be selected items dot length. That one should have selected items should have length, shouldn't it? Filter should return an array, shouldn't it? Length greater than 0. Okay, where's your problem? No problem. So now, if has selected is unequal to the new selected, it means something has changed. Either we have no more selected items or we have a selected item. So let's actually add this has changed. And we can see this in the logs. So if I check out the logs now, okay, I can click this one. Actually, it's called the whole time now. That's not perfect. And clear all should also call our handle clear all. We can, by the way, put that into use already. So where's my button? Yep, the first button should not use navigation go back, but just handle clear all. And the second one is navigation back. Okay, so let's see again. Clear all, clears all. That's good. But has changed is definitely triggered too often. So let's see. Let's go back here. And if we do this, okay, yeah. After we've done this, we also need to set our selected. So that is like the historic version. We're going to set this to the new selected items. So once we do this, we should see, okay, let's refresh so we can see this again. We change it once, but now it's not changing anymore. Only when I go back and have 0 items has changed is triggered again. So only in those 2 cases, our function will now run. That's good. So in those cases, I will update the flex value and I will check, do we have selected values? Then I want to use a width of 150 for my button. If not, I'm going to reduce the button size to 0. And because we're using these animated styles, it will just animate the change of that button. In fact, to make that change take some time, we're going to wrap this, but for now, let's just see how we can apply this. So we now need to apply our use animated style to component just like we would do with a style sheet. Therefore, let's go to the button. So here is my touchable opacity, and I'm going to change this into an array. So it will not only get the styles from the outline button, but we will also use the animated styles in here. That should be animated styles. I definitely don't want to have a typo in that case. Okay, so we also see that we now get an error because reading the value directly is only possible on the UI runtime. Yeah, that is a very cryptic error, and it usually means that when you use these animated styles, you also have to apply this to the surrounding view. And I'm going to do this in a different way now. So I'm actually not going to do this on here. I'm going to put this in an animated.view, and I'm going to use my styling in here. Also for the touchable opacity, we can basically remove this. So we have all the styling up here in the animated view, and then we close it down here. Make sure that you update the import from React Native reanimated. And now it's better. So now the button has a width of 0. That looks actually okay. I wonder if it changes something if I change the order here. Not completely, but we're also not yet done. So we will now go back to the full button, and first of all tell that full button to use a flex of 1. So it's using up the full width. This sometimes causes some height issues as well with our animation. So I'm going to define that this button should have a height of 56. And I will actually set this for my outline button as well. Good. Now, what happens if I click this? Okay, not too bad, not too bad. This is actually a pretty good start. I didn't expect that one. So with that in place, let's see. We have the height, we have everything. Now we just need to animate this, and we somehow need to get rid of the border. I mean, we could probably animate the border width as well, but what I found is that it's just about the scaling as well. So while we currently animate only the width of it, we're gonna also now animate the scale. And we will also add the actual animation, and we can do this by making sure that when we change our shared value here, we're gonna wrap this in with timing. With timing is a default function from React Native Reanimated that gives us some nice ease into a function. So as a result, this now looks like this. And because I really want to be a perfectionist in some cases, this is not perfect for me. So the button, the text should somehow change. I feel like the button should transform and the text should scale down. So I'm going to add another shared value. I will call this one scale. It starts at 0 as well. It will change its value here with timing. And if it's visible, it will use a value of 1. Otherwise, we're going to scale it back to 0. And now I'm creating another animated styles object. I will call this one animated text. And instead of something with a width, we are going to use transform, and we apply our value to the scale. Now we just need to apply this to a part of our item, and we need to make sure that we once again put animated in front of it if we want to use our animations on this component. So I'm going to put in my animated text here for the button text, and let's see. Now the text is, while it's getting smaller, the text size is also shrinking down. The only problem that's left is the border radius on our view. So why is there still a border radius? That's a pretty good question. Okay, I think I found a little hack. So for our animated styles, we will not only change the width, we will also change the opacity. So the opacity will be flex with value either 1 or 0. Let's see. Yeah, that's better. I mean, it's not perfect, but I think a combination of these different pieces really helps us to build that animation. And now I think we can be quite confident about that. For users, this will just look good. We have an animation that enters this. Hello. On click, I should be able to clear this, and it will also fade out that button again. So I think we can be really confident with that. And this is really the basic usage of React Native Reanimated. You create a shared value. At some point, you change that value either with timing or with another function. So there are different functions that you could use with timing, with string, with sequence, delay, a whole lot that you can figure out and play around with Reanimated. We've just really used the basic. And then we create our styling using useAnimatedStyle and apply that just like we would do with a style sheet to the actual component, which then needs to be wrapped with animated to allow the animation of the different parts of that item. Now, we have the bottom sheet. We have the somewhat perfect modal, including animations. So I think it's finally time that we get into some API calls. In the next part, we're going to integrate a Google Map in our application, and we're also going to use the Google Maps API. So this is the screen we want to build. And that screen should come up once we click here and on current location. So on current location, we have to open this new page. It's going to be a modal. That's not a problem. We know how to create a header like this. And then we need an input bar, which will come from a nice component. We need a map view, which we can use from Expo, and a button fixed in an absolute position. And we've already seen how that works. So let's maybe start with the easy part. The easy part would be to add another modal to our application. And I'm going to call this one location search.tsx. This is going to be a React Native functional export component. And this is location search. You could also just call all the pages page. It doesn't really matter what you name them. To get to this page, we're gonna have to include it in our layout. So just like we did for the modal filter page, I will now copy this over. So this will be under modal/location search. The presentation in this case won't be modal. This will actually be a full screen modal. So that will just cover the whole screen. The other one gave us the little iOS card effect, and we're gonna do it like this now. The header title is going to be search location. Header shadow visible, we don't really need any of that. We probably want to have a custom header left button, so I think close outline with a primary color should be just fine. Now let's go to our custom header and add the position where we can... No, it's actually in the bottom sheet, right? I got confused. So we go back to the bottom sheet, and where we can click on current location. We previously had it like this, so I'm now using my new URL, which is the location search, and now pressing it should bring up this modal in full screen. So you see, previously if we would just push this on a stack, then it would just like come in and we had this back button, and now we have this nice modal overview which just fills up the whole screen. So that is a nice getting started point. So on that page it's getting really interesting as we need to integrate the Google API. So simply navigate to console.cloud.google.com and it might open up one of your projects. So I'm just going to start a new one. I will call this Food UI Clone. It doesn't really matter. And I hit create. So usually this takes a few seconds to create, and what we need is we need to get an API key for the Google Places API and the, I think, reverse or geocoding API. There's no project Food UI Clone. I think it is. So here it is. Let's get a bit bigger. From the navigation menu, I don't want to go to the credentials as I want to set up some credentials. I don't want to set up a consent screen yet. I only want to create an API key. So it's going to create this API key, and then we're going to have to find the right APIs that we're going to enable for this key. We can actually copy this. We will restrict it as well in a second. So let's go here and let's see. We can now restrict this key to specific APIs. So I'm going to search for the Places API. That's good. And the geocoding. Oh yeah, we haven't enabled the services yet. Let's probably enable them first. How can we close this? Yeah, that's better. Enable APIs and services. I'm going with the Places API. So do we want to use the Places API new, or do we want to use the Places API? I feel like we should just use the Places API. I don't feel fancy about anything new today. So let's enable this one, which will give us information, get the data from the same database used by Google Maps. Is it enabled? Yeah, it should be, right? Okay, perfect. Now let's see, let's get back to my credentials. I can actually also, can I delete this one? But I should be able to, right, now see the Places. So the Places API can be enabled. However, I still need the geocoding. So I'm going back, geocoding, API, hit enable on that. And then we are able to add that for our key as well. So by default, our key is unrestricted. And with that key, anyone could use all the services, and you don't really want to do that because that could lead to some problems probably. So I want to get into my API key. I will restrict this now so it can only be used for Places API and no, geocoding API. Those are the two APIs. I'm going to hit save now. You can later on also restrict your key to other things like specific websites, or specific bundle IDs and applications, but for now we're just gonna stick to what it is and copy over that key. And now we create a new .env file at the root of our project. We're gonna add expo public, and if you add something with expo public, you're able to access that key from the process environment in your code. And then we're gonna say this is the Google API key. I'm gonna put it in here. Now, to pick this up, we also have to restart our server here. So let's restart npx expo, and that should put out a little log actually. Unpaid alias is enabled. I feel like this did not pick it up. Yeah, because I haven't called this .env. It needs to be called .env, of course. Let's see again. And now env file loaded, export public API key. Now, one word of caution here. So this key is inside an environment file, and you might have heard that keys are safe inside an environment file, but that is only true if it is on a server. If this is in our application, it will still be bundled with our application. So we're now going to access that key in, let's say, the location search. So at some point, we're going to use it like process.env. Whatever it was called. I think expo public, what was it called? Expo public something key. So just like this. Are we still doing this? Yeah, we're still having this. So let me restart my iOS view, and then we should probably even see the key right in our location search. And the problem is wherever we use this in our code, it will be bundled with our front-end application, and therefore it is not a secure way. This is only secure like for private keys if you integrate Stripe payments and stuff, only inside a server environment, not in here. So just making sure that we are on the same page about that. Now, what we need as well is a map view. So we're going to install the Expo map view. This is already working right here in our Expo Go client. So it's going to be really easy to test things out for us. Let's give this a bit more space and call npx expo install the React Native maps. The package we also want to install is called React Native Google Places Autocomplete. And it looks basically like this. So we're gonna have this nice view where we can search, just like Google, we can show powered by Google, or we can leave it out. No matter what, we're going with npm install React Native Google Places Autocomplete. And now with both packages in place, we can finally implement our location search. So I'm going to start by wrapping this whole view in flex1, so we're taking up the full space. I'll also create my usual styles object down here, and I will add a map property here, and that map should also take up the full available space for now. Style sheet comes as always from React Native, and we don't really need the text like this. We actually need the process value, so I'm going to put it in here so I don't need to figure it out again in a second. So this is what we're going to use. Now, in our view, we want to display the map view from Expo. So we can use the map view from React Native Maps, and we're going to pass a few things. Actually, I don't know what happens if we just use the default styling and nothing else. Let's see. Oh, we see a map. That's pretty nice. Cool. So now we can play around with this, and I'd say we get started by defining a default location. So in my case, I'm going to set a little state here and use this default location. So by default, it is not yet set, but we can specify the region for the map view, and I will put in my location. And if I do this, it will focus on London right now. I could have also used Germany or anything. Just want to show that with the right coordinates, we're able to focus our view. Now, would be cool if this stays open. Thank you. Additionally, you can also say something like show user location. So if we set this to true, it should eventually show the location. Let's try and refresh the application by pressing R. And then we see, we don't really see the user location yet. I don't know why. But, well, we're gonna keep it like this. Additionally, I want to display the button at the bottom. So we have that view, and we have select, oh, it's select location, not search location, and then confirm at the bottom. So we're gonna add that confirm block, which is going to be a simple view with some styling. Most likely, is it going to be absolute? I don't know, but I will call this absolute box. So that's the name I will give to this. Actually, we can define a few objects. So in that absolute box, we will definitely have a button. So button goes here, and then we also, as always, have a button text, which goes here. So that means we have a touchable opacity once again. Touchable opacity using the styles.button. That's correct. Update the import. And for the text, we're gonna just say confirm. Now, our box here should be, as I said, absolute position. So we're gonna have to call it position absolute. I want to use build space from the bottom, so I'm going to use bottom 20, and we will use the whole width. So I think we can just give it a width of 100. Now we haven't styled the button, so let's probably do that first. Yeah, then we already see the button down here. But we will of course use colors.primary, and if we give the button some padding and some margin, then it should already look pretty good. Yeah, that's a decent start. Additionally, I want to align the items in the center, just like before. We could probably also just create our own like generic button component. And also this needs border radius, yes. Okay, we're coming pretty close. That button should also just hide the view. So we once again inject the navigation here using the hook. Navigation equals use navigation from the expo router, and then on the touchable opacity we will say on press, please just go back. Go back. There we go. And that should probably close it. Yep. And the button up there of course works the same. By the way, I still want to fix this. Like, I can't stand this. This has to say select location. Now I'm fine with that. Okay, cool. So we have a map view. And by the way, a quick word about that. If you use the Expo map view in a real application, you have to use some other keys and create a real API key and use that, especially if you're using the Expo application build services. It is described in here. We won't go through that as it's not really related to our UI client. It's just that the map view automatically works with the Expo Go client, but if you want to do this in a real application, your own application later, you're gonna have to add some more information. Great, we have the map. Now we just need the input for Google Places. And this is where the second package comes into play that we install, the React Native maps. We can import Google Places autocomplete, just like this. And by the way, whenever you see something like this, just put in an ad. Usually Visual Studio Code is not figuring out correctly, so you can do it like this. And then let's just take this first little snippet here and put it in the view. So we have a placeholder, we have an on press, and we have a query. Text with string. Okay, yeah, it looks like, yep, I copied that one. So let's go back and we have a search. Let's search for Berlin and we see, okay, there's an overlay, but something seems to be wrong. So I'm gonna hit J, which opens up the JavaScript debugging console, because usually in here I can see better what's going on. So let's try and zoom in and just test this. Okay, so most likely, I mean, we kind of know what's wrong, as we can't really display any results without an API key. So let's put in our API key, and now I can finally copy this out again. And put it in the key. So this is my API key now. Let's try and reload this so it correctly picks up the key. Let's see. And can I now search? Yeah, I can. We got the search. How epic is that? This is using the key that we just created in Google API. This is our key. We are talking to Google. I love it when I can like connect APIs and just make it work. Oh, I don't want to kill that. Also, when I now click on an element, like Berlin here, we will get a lot of description. So we get data and details, match string, structure, information, types, a lot of interesting stuff, but there's no information in here that tells us where exactly this place is. So in a perfect world, I would now like to update my state with a latitude and longitude. but I can't really do it right now. Usually we should be able to get the point. Let's see. We normally should be able to get a point from details, geometry, location. Geometry might also be null and details might also be null. So I will just log out the point. However, I think right now, yeah, the point is undefined because we're not yet using the API completely. What we want to put in here is we want to also add something called fetch details true. If we do this, it is using the geocoding API. Let's try again. Let's use Berlin here. And then we see we get back a point with those coordinates. And with the coordinates, we should be easily able to update our view and center our map. But keep in mind, you have to enable the geocoding and the places API in the Google console to make this part here work. Also, I will call this search or move the map. And in my function here, I will check. If we don't have a point, then I will just return. And otherwise, I will update my location and I'm going to use point.latitude. For the longitude, I'm using point longitude. And I will keep all the longitude and latitude delta. So I will use the spread operator of the current location. So it will take all the values currently and then just override those two. That should work. Let's give it a try. I'm trying to use Berlin, Germany. And we see in the background the map is updating. Now, there is a problem. This seems to completely cover our map. So we do have a little issue with the styling here. And we might put in some different styling. So let's add a style object. Styles. And we could do it in here. I think it was recommended actually. I don't know if we want to do this in here or not. So the places has some props, it has some styling. How did they recommend it? Yeah, they recommend to use these keys for styling, like a container, a text input, or a text input container. So let's try and use them directly in here. First of all, for the container, I'm going to say, please use flex. Okay, we need to make this an object, flex 0. So then it will not be above the map at all. I mean, that's a good start. Actually, that's perfect, right? I mean, that mostly works. So let's also work on the text input. So we can give some custom styling to the text input field as well. For the background color, I will use my own gray color now. Going to use colors.gray. And if I close this, we should already see, yeah, the background here turns gray. I will also give this some more padding left. Padding left of 35. So I really want to move it away because what we eventually want is to have this white border around it. So we really see there is a white border around this field. And we need to make that happen. And we also, of course, need that icon. Therefore, let's go back here and let's also add text input container styling. That one will actually get a white background. Okay, so we see it already shows up a line. And if I now add padding, I think, yeah, we make it stand out. That looks better. Good, nice. Also, that field should have a border radius of, let's say, 10. Okay, we're pretty close. We also have the intentional padding left here, so we can render an icon at that position. To render an item left, there's also another function we can add. So we can have render left button. You can also have render right button, but of course we want to just render one to the left-hand side. And this one will be, well, it should just be pretty much just an Ionicon, right? Let's see, can we just do an Ionicons? Name should be something like search outline, size 24 and colors medium. What happened? What styling did you add? Styling margin left. Okay, so that renders it like this. This is a problem as it's not correct. What if we use the background color, the same gray that we used? Somewhat okay, but I feel like we need an absolute position. This is not going to work. So I'm going to remove the styling from the Ionicon, and instead I will simply wrap my Ionicon in another view. So let's open a view, style, and this one will get styles dot what do we call this? Box icon. Perfect name, Simon. Perfect. Okay, box icon goes down here. I think that's actually the last thing for this view already, right? So this is going to be an absolute position. From the left, I'm going to be, let's say, I think 15. That should work. And top 18. Okay, so now I'm not seeing anything. I'm going to up the Z index here. Yeah, now we're talking, and I don't even need to set the background color. I think this looks perfect. Speaking about perfect, I think that's our view. So we're initially focused on London. We can hit something like New York, United States. United States. Yeah, that's what it means, of course. It's New York. We can zoom, scroll out as much as we want to. We can select a different location and start again and just quickly jump over to Berlin or my hometown, Münster, Germany. Here we go. I'm living in the south of Münster, and this is Germany, and there's the sea. Yeah. Okay, perfect. And with confirm, we can leave that view. So it wasn't actually too hard to use Google Maps. Just keep in mind, your API key is not safe only because it's in an environment file. The map view might not work if you finally deploy the app. So for go live, for production mode, you're gonna have to follow the guide from Expo to set up the according values in your files. But with that in place, I think we figured out all the overlays. So we have the custom header with a bottom sheet, we have the location full screen modal, and we have the cart modal here with the animation. So I think we are finally ready to actually build out our index page with the restaurants and categories. In the next part, we're now going to focus on scroll views and creating some cool components. Especially, we're going to create a component that helps us to render this horizontal scroll view. And we also want to make a reusable card component that we can put into another scroll view. So surrounding this will be another scroll view that goes like here and displays how many cards we have. Same here, of course, this also goes out to how many items we got in that list. And to achieve that, we're using some assets from our file. So I got a home TS, which has some categories for the first scroll view. And then we have like 3 restaurants with some random information that I took previously from the Deliveroo page. So credit again to all of the assets and information from Deliveroo. Okay, we can get into our index file and let's probably clear up what we already had so we can close most of that. In our index file, we now want to render these 2 components. So we can't put them in the app directory, so I'm going to add them to my components. The first one will be the categories scroller. So I will just call this categories. And the second component will be a restaurants row, restaurants.tsx. React Native functional export restaurants. Cool. With those 2 in place, we can once go back to our homepage, and on the homepage render a simple scroll view. So let's use that scroll view, and within that scroll view I'm going to put my categories. So there's nothing else this requires. And below it, we think we had some text, right? So above the restaurant ones, we're gonna add some text. I'm going to use a style again. So we haven't set that up yet, but this will eventually be like the header styling. And then I would say top picks in your neighborhood. Okay, I don't know, British English, American English. I don't really care, I'm from Germany. Style sheet, create. And for my header, I'm going to use font size not too big. 24 is probably too big. I'm just going with 800. And I will also, of course, use font weight, bold, and some margin bottom. Margin bottom actually just a bit less. Like margin bottom should be 16 and some padding horizontal to make sure that we stay here. So we don't see anything because our custom header is currently actually blocking this. So we're now going to add a new container styling, and I'm going to wrap my view in a save area view because that will make sure that we also respect the different areas. And I think we have used the save area view before in other screens. So as the styling, we will use styles.container. And now for my container, I will say that we're going to have some padding at the top of 30. Will this help me? Probably. Let's also set my background color. I currently don't see anything. I feel like my save area view is not yet taking up. I think we need this save area view from React Native save area context. Yeah, well, it's getting better. It's not perfect yet, but once we have our stuff in here, I think this should eventually work. So below this, we would then render the restaurants item, and then we're just gonna repeat that pattern, and I will just call this one offers near you. So we're gonna have something on our screen to scroll. I'm not entirely sure why top 30 is not enough in this case. Maybe I had a different height before. I feel like my header here, the search bar, is quite high. What do we use for the custom header? It looks like this search container is really very, very high. So let's look at this. This is a height of 60 in our search container. What if we give this like a 50? Well, and it's also making like everything smaller. I feel like there's something else at work. What's about the search section? Well, we just get a padding here. Well, it's not too bad actually. I just feel like this is quite the distance here, especially towards the bottom. So we might want to address that, but I'm also not super sure if we have to. So probably we're just going to keep it. Most likely, we had this one, we had the attachable opacity. This is actually just the search thing. Maybe the search field, but that one also just has a flex 1 on row. There's nothing bad about that search field. And the search section just has a... Yeah, there's nothing really messing up the whole styling of that thing. I don't know who exactly is doing all of that padding, but for now we're gonna keep it like it is. Let's implement the categories, the restaurants, and the other restaurants scroller. First of all, let's start with categories. So on that page, I want to first of all bring in the data. So I'm going to import categories from this file, and those categories will be used in my view. Now, this should be a horizontal scroll view. So we're using a scroll view from React Native, and I will tell this to please be horizontal. Make sure you get the import, and then TypeScript should also work. Now it's a horizontal scroller. And in that horizontal scroller, I will map through all the categories that we have and create views for them. They will all have something like styles.category card. Let's call it like that. And for every item in your map block, you should assign a key so that everyone or that React is able to figure it out correctly and make sure there are different elements. We don't have the styles yet, so let's also add them. So style sheet dot create. Yeah, and there will be something in that category card. Also add that up here, and then we should see the first results. Now, in that view, I'm going to give this an exact height and width. So I'm going with a width and a height of 100. Then we already see we can scroll this. So I'm going with the first thing I want to display is the image. That usually really helps to construct the view. So the image source is the category image. And if I render this, no, it's actually the IMG. Yeah, then we have it. We have this ugly scrolling thing at the bottom, but we can get rid of that by saying shows horizontal scroll indicator false. Okay, now we can scroll it just like this. Additionally, do we want to have some styling in there? We might want to have, but at some point. Let's for now also add a text element here, and that should be the category dot text. Okay, so that renders below. Not too bad, but most likely we're gonna need some styling in here as well. So this will be category text, and I will put it down here as well. That should probably have something like a bit of padding. Does it already work? And the font size, yeah, really small font size, but still a big font weight. Okay, yeah, that looks somewhat good. Now I want to make sure that these items are actually white and have a little bit of shadow. So I'm going to make sure that the background here is using the right color. I think our index page, I don't know if the index page is, or yeah, it's using a white background. I don't want that. I definitely want to have colors light gray. That's what we usually use for the background. So now we got the light gray background. And with that, we should also be able to give the category card a background color white. Okay. There should also be some padding between these elements. How do we do this? I think we need to do something with a margin. Let's say we give each of them a margin of 10. Then we have this nice separation. We also want some padding here. I think if we want to inject styling into the scroll view now, we're going to use the content container style. Otherwise, it will complain how you inject the styling. And within here, you can say something like padding 15. So now it stands out more. And I think this is already pretty close to our desired result, isn't it? Also, I feel like now we don't have to be that far away from the top anymore. Yeah. Now it totally makes sense. Now this looks a lot better. Cool. We also wanted to give this some elevation. So let's use an elevation of 2 for Android. Elevation. And then we can define our shadow color. So for shadow color, I'm just going with black usually, and then make sure that the shadow offset works. So let's use something like this. Height 2, maybe just height 4. And then we also need the shadow opacity. Yeah, that's pretty nice. Maybe we can make this even more visible. Just a tiny notch here. I think this is actually really not too bad, isn't it? We have our font. The font doesn't really need background, but I think it could be more centered. What if we give this... No, not like that. Justify content, or was it? It's not really working here, right? We have just the full width. So I could probably give this more padding, but that won't change a lot. But anyway, I in general feel good about this. Although this could actually be 14, like it's not that small in this one. Yeah, I think this comes pretty close. Just some border radius up here. Border radius, give it a border radius of 4, and voila, you have an epic slider. We have the padding at the start and end, as we can see here. So it will be nicely aligned with our 16 padding that we usually have in all the places, and also for the end, this. So you see these like mental lines that you can draw. They're usually pretty good if you can stick to them. In here we have the same. So we scroll this back. We should see that here is basically aligned, and this is where everything is aligned. So once you do something that is not aligned, same for here, this is also just aligned. once you see this, it just feels off, and you should always keep an eye on that. Anyway, this is our first scroller, and I think we did a pretty good job with that one. Now, the interesting thing is I think we can just copy this over for now. We can copy this over to restaurants. Just making sure that this is now once again called restaurants. I don't want to import anything. And for the restaurants, we are going to exactly import that data. And we still have the same scroll view now in our restaurants view. We want a horizontal scroll. We might have to limit the height a bit. We're going to see that. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to start by mapping through the restaurants. And every item will eventually link to something. So we're going to add the link component around it. The href will be set. So I'm going to set this for the moment just to the slash path, but we could easily now link to like a details page of that restaurant. We're going to use the key, and just like before, we are using asChild, as we will wrap another component or multiple components in that view. Oh, that's actually a nice start. Like, I didn't expect that. That happened really fast. However, we should also use a touchable opacity once again. Touchable opacity from React Native. Wrapping this around the actual view, and that view can stick to the category card. The only thing I want to change is that this should be 300 in width and 250 in height. So as you can see, this is going to be a lot bigger. These are bigger cards. Also top picks in your neighborhood. This is not aligned, but we're gonna maybe fix that later. Let's stick with this view for now. So we have the category card. We don't need the index in here again. So like this, and then we have first of all a really big image. So this is going to be the restaurant, not the so this should be the restaurant image. Okay, that image is probably a bit too big. Let's say we're going with a little image container, and that image container goes around the image. I wonder if we just supply styled in here and say that this one has like a flex 1. That's not too bad. I mean, that's not too bad. But the width, let's try something. Let's give this a width of undefined. Yeah. And do I have to still set the height as well, or? Oh, well, it won't really change. But giving it a width of undefined. Yeah, flex 1 to take up the full space, but then width undefined. That should work. So then it's just using the inherent width, styles.image. And I'm going to add this down here. So that would be a different way to create your styling. Just try it inline, basically, and then later create the object in the styling down here. Now, below this, we also need the actual information. So we not just only need the image, but we want that block with information. So let's see how we can fit that into our card. We're gonna do this still in the touchable opacity. We're still doing this within the category card. But I wanna do this now behind this. I'm going to give this some new styling. So styles.category box. And within the category box, we're going to have some text elements. So we're going to have something like the restaurant.name and more information to come. So let's add category box. I'm actually not sure if we use or will need the other one. Okay, that shows nicely below this already. That's not too bad. Well, let's see. I think we can just do this pretty easy. So the category box here and the image are both in a flex layout. Right now, they take up just like some automatic space. If I tell this category box to use up like flex 1, both would use the equal space. If I want to have like one thing take up about 60% and the other 40, we can combine these different flex values. So if I give to the image, let's say 5,